Welcome. Hello, Linda, Catlin Smith.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Um, it's the ZUMI piano duo here, Mikolaj and Zuzana, and we have the pleasure of interviewing Linda about her piece that we had just performed and made a video recently of. And this is the piece called Velvet. So I would like to dive right in and ask Linda the story about how Velvet came to be.
The Velvet was written for the Ferretti Lau piano duo, which are two wonderful pianists that teach at Wilfrid Laurier University. And I was also teaching there for many years. I taught there for 21 years. And they asked me to write them a piece. And that was the first time, I think it's the only time actually, I've written for two pianos. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to investigate what you can do, or what I can do with two pianos.
Awesome. Yeah, really, it was an exciting journey for us too because of the crossover and the
Exactly.
way the
Yeah.
pianos blended together was so unusual and new to feel that the organism almost is one. Um,
It's kind of like I was writing for two pianos to really play almost thickening as one. So often you're playing together. And intentionally in this piece, I have you playing grace notes, which cannot be exactly together. So
yeah,
the piece has to do with the being together but not together.
yes, yes,
So
those
it's it's
are
it's like a little fuzziness, which is where the idea of velvet came from. It's a bit fluffy and
nice,
fuzzy and not precise. It can't be precise because of all the grace notes. So the grace notes allow it this kind of tumbling
right?
quality in the playing, which you got very, very well.
And that kind of feeds nicely into the way the sound, um, the frequencies sort of
Yeah,
mesh together, right? And they sort of
exactly. Yeah, so
undulate.
so because there's the pedal is down, there's a kind of blooming that's going on all the time too.
Nice.
Um, and and meanwhile, you're tasked with bringing out these inner melodies within these lush chords. So there's that aspect of touch going on as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I noticed that in addition to the actual material velvet on your SoundCloud, you have a picture of sort of moss from like as if it's some sort of rainforest that kind of gives another element to it too. Was that your idea? Or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's from a picture from Salt Spring Island that I took when I was visiting a friend of mine in the forest there. And I mean, moss is kind of nature's velvet, right? So I just thought, well, instead of showing an actual velvet, I'll just make a little leap here as a metaphor.
Right on.
It
So
has, it has that texture, that softness.
yeah, and so it kind of ties into um, another question that I have because I notice your style is it's so smooth and so homogeneous and sort of all encompassing in a very in a way which almost feels impressionistic. Is that safe to assume that you're kind of out of that style, out of that lineage?
Yeah, it's funny. I do think of it that way. I mean, obviously, or maybe it's not obvious. I don't know. But one of my big influence is Debussy,
Yeah.
in terms of and Ravel, in terms of their extended harmonies and their sense of piano chords, actually.
Yeah.
And so I do relate to the idea of impressionism, which even in painting is again dealing with visuals as having a kind of vibrational, fuzzy, not quite, it's not, it's not really hard edged. There's a softness to everything. And so I think that way about it, but I also love abstract expressionism, which is another form of painting that I'm very close to because of its sense of most of them are many of them are larger paintings, and so there you can be in something for a while, which is why I like to have something go on for a little bit in music, as opposed to something that changes rapidly bar by bar.
Yeah.
So I started to think of myself as neither not strictly speaking an abstraction person or an impressionist, but as an abstract impressionist.
Nice.
That's kind of where I see myself,
That's a good one.
if it's not too arrogant to say.
No. And another thing that I thought about is different senses come to play, almost like perfumes, or like some type of associations with smell wafting through the evening air, like another Debussy
I've,
Yeah,
idea.
I've seen
parfum de la nuit. Yeah.
Oh,
What's that?
I've seen planets like a cosmic almost
Wow.
vibrations from the strings, and yeah,
Mm.
completely.
Well, I think that's one of the, very special aspects of music, is that it invites a response inside ourselves, in our imagination, that really we can't control or predict. So, but I do think there is, we're dealing with sensation. So sound is sensation, and it's almost like this sense of oral touch. Sound is going in our ears, and then it's triggering a sensation, or a sense of feeling, or a sense of qualities.
mhm.
Is it dense or sparse? Is it hard or soft? Is it, loud or quiet? These qualities are very complex, that are coming into us. And then we have our own inner responses. So of course, for everyone, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
We could all have conversations about it. I know some people who hear music and perceive it in terms of shapes, almost visual shapes, or some have synesthesia in terms of color, which I have a bit.
Oh,
Um, and then, but I love the idea of a perfume, almost like,
mhm,
yes, the sound is almost affecting us, like
mhm.
we smell something and it takes us into a
Yeah.
state. So, because music is really creating these states of being,
Yes.
and whether it's a high-paced, fast, energetic state of being, or something very dramatic, or in my case, something that's slower and a little bit more introspective, perhaps. And these states of being are what we love music for, because it takes us into this thing that we understand emotionally and physically and all kinds of ways, but it's not really about language. So
Mhm.
that's why we're talking around it today. We're talking
Yeah.
around how do we understand these things, but it's actually in the state of being, or state of feeling, or sensations itself. And it can trigger memories, or trigger new thoughts. And so I think of music that way, that it allows us to give over ourselves for this brief time. And so we're not even ourselves in that moment. If we're really listening, we let ourselves go into the listening, almost trying to become the music, just to be
Yeah.
with it.
Definitely. Thank you. And there's a sort of a feeling of a timelessness almost in your compositions. And I'm just wondering, is there like a spiritual meditative, obviously there must be a pathway there that you're kind of exploring a little bit with this kind of flowing quality of the music,
Um,
or it's just naturally coming out that way.
I mean, I think I just find music to be something that I like it to unfold slowly, because I want to hear everything in it. And I'm drawn to perhaps more subtle and undramatic qualities in artwork. Like, for instance, still life paintings. They're very quiet, and they're just mundane objects, usually, a bowl of fruit or a flower, with lots of shadowing and color and texture, but they have this feeling to them of perhaps loneliness, or a sense of the transience of life, right? And just they have a mood. And I really love the word mood, because I think music carries that. As for the spiritual nature, I think that's something very private for people. I mean, I don't really have anything I can say about it, because I'm not consciously thinking that way, but I do know that that's something that people can pick up on in their own way. If it's a piece of music that gives you room for that kind of, attitude of thought. For me, it's again, I go back to wanting to just be in the music and let it go its way. I almost don't feel like I want to manipulate it too much. I just want to stick with something and hear it for a while. And then I think, does it need to get thicker or thinner? In Velvet towards the end, I just pile on the chords and it gets quite thick for a bit. It's like it
Yeah.
gets its most thickness before it thins out and leaves. And it just seemed to need a little bit more weight at that time. So that's the kind of thinking I might be doing, is
Nice.
what
Yeah.
does it need now?
Beautiful. That's a great
Yeah.
exploration of your piece. Thank you. So how was the composition process for you shifted from the time of Velvet to now, and what are you kind of onto in this period of your
Yeah, I mean, the process for me is always, finding some bit of material that's intriguing and then just spending time with it over, to figure out what is this, can this be something, what is this world? And, it's a lot of, I compose very intuitively. Um, and I work with pencil and paper at the piano, and so of course with Velvet, it's piano. But yeah, then later I put it on the computer at the end so that I can make a score and send it out. And as far as how has it changed, I guess I feel like I've always been motivated by harmony and melody, these basic qualities of music, and I'm still really attracted to those things and to figure out where can I grow in terms of harmony, because we have 12 pitches, we all have the same materials, but I feel like I can keep learning and maybe getting a little bit more complex over time. And I feel like some of my work got a bit thicker over the last number of years. I got a little bit more drawn to counterpoint, to weaving independent voices and getting it to be a little bit almost messy, like tangled.
yeah.
So I do what I call bad counterpoint, where I don't follow any rules, but I do it by ear. And it's not so much to create voices that you can hear, but to create a mesh where you can't quite tell who's where, and yet harmonically it still is clean and clear. And so I think I've been developing in that way. And then the other thing is, over the last number of years, people have asked me to write longer pieces. So I have a couple of pieces that are edging up to an hour.
Wow.
Yeah,
That would,
and
if it really fits
Yeah.
the sort of mood aspect, you can really delve into that deeply, right?
yeah, and it allows, it's really interesting because when you have something that's 7 or 8 minutes, which is a duration I really like, it can feel like it has a certain breadth to it, but it's concise, so it's a whole world in a shorter period of time. But with a long work, it's interesting to see, okay, how long do I go with something, and then does it need something new at some point, and what kind of newness, and what kind of memory can I use? Do I bring something back from earlier? And I like to usually bring something back from earlier but kind of misremember it, do it differently, um, and just so to play with what do we hold, what do we lose over time? How does something, almost like dealing with, how does something age? How does the material age or degrade or evolve over time? So that's the kind of latest development, I would
And
say.
and for these longer pieces, 'cause I know that you're also delving into like traditional uh, ensembles, but putting in a completely new spin on it with your ideas and your compositional process, like trio, piano trio, string quartet, what have you. But I also noticed you're doing really unique stuff like 9 strings ensemble or piano
Hmm.
harpsichord. which also can, give a whole new idea to aesthetic. And for these long pieces, does that mean it has to be like a symphony, or it can also be like a song cycle, like a Schubert hour piece? Or what kind of a?
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Actually, the long pieces. So the first long piece I did, I asked myself to do, and that was for cello and piano, and it's 45 minutes. And I wrote it for my pianist friend Eva Goyen and my brother, who's a cellist, Andrew Smith, because I knew they wouldn't mind doing a longer piece. And I also had a feeling they would get along, that they had a simpatico way of playing, and I was right, they did. And so that was the first one. And then last year I was asked to do an hour-long solo violin piece, which I haven't heard yet, but I wrote it for a Czech violinist.
Nice.
So that's a solo violin for an hour. That was challenging.
That's great. Is it going to be premiered in Czech or something?
I think so. I think he's going to do it sometime in the summer, is what he was saying. Milan Pala is his name. And then
my schoolmate. Sorry.
No, you know him really?
Yeah.
I don't even know him. I haven't met him or anything.
He's an incredible violinist. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. Well, I was so excited that he asked for it that I just had to do it. But I mean, it was challenging, I have to say. So I'm really happy that you like him. That's so nice. And then I'm also doing an hour-long piano solo now. Yeah, that's my next one. So it's interesting, just to have, and I'm not unusual in this. There are other people doing these long pieces, but I don't think I ever thought I was going to do that when I was younger. It never seemed like something I would end up doing. So
I'm sure everything you put your mind to is going to sound beautifully.
Thank you.
We had a lot of fun with the velvet, so I think it was a wonderful choice too.
Yeah, to work with the texture.
Yeah.
Well, it's always so nice to meet other musicians who are getting to know my work, and I really appreciate the performance that you gave. And where was that, by the way?
That was actually in the Czech Republic as well, in the Petrof Gallery, which is in Hradec, Králové. It's northern Bohemia.
Wow.
Because there's a Petrof factory where they are making those instruments.
Right, I saw the Petrof name there, and I was trying to think, do they have a place in Edmonton?
No, unfortunately.
They used to have a really good supplier here.
Okay.
So yeah, we are looking for different venues and different instruments.
Right.
As well, which can blend and what colors they can deliver.
That's right. Yeah.
And also push them to the, out of their comfort range to see if brighter pianos can offer softer.
Yes, that's right. I mean, they are bright pianos, and it adds it brings another element to the piece for sure, because the piece has such quiet dynamics and is usually quite a muted quality to it, but it holds its own with this brighter sound, doesn't it? Like
at least it still blends.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, it's very, very interesting for me to hear that. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us this afternoon, and all the best to you and your projects going forward.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you, and again, thanks for the performance.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Linda.